Scenario Forecast, Africa 2035 under continued U.S. China rivalry. By 2035, Africa will likely be the most strategically contested region in the global system, not because of military dominance, but because of demography, critical minerals, trade routes, and industrial potential. The rivalry between the United States and China will not resemble Cold War bipolarity. It will be competitive interdependence, technology, infrastructure, finance, and standards competition layered across African states. 3 plausible scenarios emerge. Scenario 1, Strategic Non-Alignment 2.0, most likely. African states refine a pragmatic balancing strategy. Accept infrastructure financing from China. Engage the United States on digital governance, security, and capital markets. Expand regional integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. Diversify partners, India, Gulf states, EU, Turkey. In this scenario, no African bloc formally aligns with either power. Governance models remain diverse. External competition improves bargaining leverage. Risk. Debt overhang from overlapping financing commitments. Technology fragmentation, US versus Chinese digital ecosystems. Opportunity. Infrastructure scaling without total dependency. Industrial policy experimentation. This resembles a modernized version of the non-aligned movement, less ideological, more transactional. Scenario 2, Fragmented sphere competition, moderate probability. Under intensified U.S. China rivalry, African states increasingly bifurcate. Some adopt Chinese technology standards, 5G, surveillance infrastructure, digital ID systems. Others integrate into Western regulatory frameworks and financial markets. Supply chains and digital ecosystems become incompatible. Consequences. Regulatory fragmentation across the continent. Uneven industrial development. Political polarization influenced by external patronage. In this scenario, African agency narrows because technological and financial lock-in reduces maneuverability. Risk. Sovereignty erosion through infrastructure dependency. Elite capture by foreign-aligned business networks. Scenario 3, Institutional consolidation and continental leverage, optimistic. African states collectively leverage rivalry to strengthen internal institutions. Coordinated mineral policy, lithium, cobalt, rare earths. Regional industrial zones. Debt transparency frameworks. Stronger anti-corruption enforcement. Under this outcome, rivalry becomes leverage rather than vulnerability. Executive overreach declines as fiscal transparency improves. Youth demographic dividend fuels industrial expansion. This scenario requires judicial independence, civil-military professionalism, transparent public procurement. Absent institutional reform, rivalry amplifies existing fragility. Strategic drivers to watch, 2025 to 2035. Critical minerals policy. Control of cobalt, lithium, and rare earths will define bargaining power. Debt structure. Whether debt is renegotiated transparently or used to entrench patronage networks. Digital infrastructure. Competing governance standards in surveillance, AI, and data sovereignty. Security partnerships. Private military contractors, counter-terrorism cooperation, and regional security blocs. Youth employment. With Africa's population projected to exceed 1.7 billion by 2035, job creation will determine political stability more than geopolitical alignment. The rivalry itself will not determine Africa's future. Institutional maturity will. 2. Political economy deep dive, patronage systems and executive power. Understanding governance trajectories in Africa requires examining patronage structures, not abstract ideology. Patronage politics is not simply corruption. It is an informal distribution system embedded in state formation. 1. The executive as resource gatekeeper. In many African states, the executive controls licensing, procurement, security appointments, and state-owned enterprises. Resource extraction sectors, oil, minerals, agriculture, feed central revenue pools. Fiscal centralization increases presidential leverage. This creates a vertical power structure. Executive rightward arrow, ministerial control rightward arrow, regional brokers rightward arrow, local elites rightward arrow, voters. Political loyalty often correlates with access to state contracts or employment. 2 term limits and power retention. Where patronage networks are entrenched, leadership turnover threatens. Economic access for aligned elites. Protection from prosecution. Control of security apparatus. Therefore, term limit amendments are often economically rational within patronage systems. The issue is not merely ambition, it is systemic risk for ruling coalitions. 3. Security sector alignment. Executive durability frequently depends on military professionalization, or lack thereof. Intelligence service loyalty. Control of internal security funding. Where security institutions are depoliticized, executive overreach declines. Where security is patronage-linked, accountability weakens. 4. External financing as patronage multiplier. U.S. China rivalry intersects here. Large infrastructure loans or security partnerships can expand executive-controlled capital pools, increase discretionary spending, reduce dependence on domestic taxation. Tax-dependent states are generally more accountable to citizens. Externally financed states may be less fiscally responsive. Thus, geopolitical competition can unintentionally reinforce executive dominance if transparency mechanisms are weak. 5. Civil society and countervailing power. Patronage systems persist where media independence is constrained. Electoral commissions lack autonomy. Opposition financing is restricted. Institutional counterweights shift incentives. Independent courts increase cost of abuse. Transparent procurement reduces elite capture. Decentralization limits central patronage concentration. 6. Reform levers. To reduce patronage entrenchment by 2035, African states would need public procurement digitization, transparent mineral revenue reporting, civil service professionalization, judicial budget independence, security sector reform. These reforms reduce executive monopoly over resource distribution. Integrated assessment, rivalry meets patronage. If U.S. China rivalry intensifies without institutional reform, patronage systems will absorb external capital. Executive dominance may strengthen. Democratic formalities may persist without substantive accountability. If rivalry is leveraged strategically, infrastructure can enable industrialization. Mineral wealth can fund sovereign wealth mechanisms. Institutional strengthening can enhance sovereignty. The determinant variable is not which external power is engaged. It is whether domestic institutions constrain executive discretion. Final outlook for 2035. Africa in 2035 will not be defined by US or Chinese ideology. It will be defined by whether patronage systems evolve into rule-based governance, whether youth employment reduces political volatility, whether fiscal transparency replaces elite rent extraction. U.S. China rivalry is an amplifier. It magnifies strengths and weaknesses. If institutions mature, rivalry becomes leverage. If institutions stagnate, rivalry entrenches executive power. The decisive arena is internal state capacity, not external alignment. 1 Nigeria 2035, Federal leverage versus patronage expansion. Baseline conditions, 2025. Federal presidential system. Oil-dependent fiscal structure. Large youth population. Security challenges, insurgency, banditry. Regional power center in West Africa. Structural pressure points. Oil revenue volatility. Subsidy politics. State-level fiscal weakness. Ethno-regional coalition balancing. Scenario A, managed reform and strategic balancing, moderate probability. Nigeria leverages rivalry to diversify energy partnerships, US LNG tech plus Chinese refining investment. Expand digital taxation and reduce oil dependency. Strengthen anti-corruption enforcement via procurement digitization. Deepen AFCFTA trade corridors. Outcome by 2035. Slower patronage expansion. Partial fiscal decentralization. Youth employment growth in services and fintech. Risk. Reform fatigue due to entrenched elite networks. Scenario B, patronage consolidation under external capital, moderate, high probability. Chinese infrastructure loans and U.S. security partnerships increase executive discretion without procurement reform. Outcome. Debt pressure intensifies. Political competition becomes costlier. Federal incumbency advantage deepens. Key variable. Judicial independence and Electoral Commission autonomy. 2 Kenya 2035, competitive democracy under debt pressure. Baseline conditions, 2025. Competitive multi-party elections. High public debt, significant Chinese infrastructure loans. Strong civil society and media. Technology hub status, mobile finance leadership. Structural pressure points. Debt sustainability. Ethnic coalition politics. Youth unemployment. Scenario A, institutional consolidation and fiscal reform, moderate probability. Kenya renegotiates debt transparently, expands digital revenue systems, and strengthens procurement oversight. Rivalry impact. U.S. tech partnerships boost digital governance. China continues infrastructure projects under stricter fiscal controls. Outcome by 2035. Democratic stability preserved. Moderate industrial growth. Reduced patronage leakage. Scenario B, debt-driven executive centralization, lower, moderate probability. Debt servicing pressures lead to expanded executive emergency powers. Reduced fiscal transparency. Increased security spending. Kenya's strong civil society makes full authoritarian drift unlikely, but executive assertiveness could rise under fiscal strain. 3 Ethiopia 2035, centralized developmental state versus fragmentation risk. Baseline conditions, 2025. Strong central executive. Ongoing ethnic federal tensions. Rapid population growth. Infrastructure-driven development model. Structural pressure points. Ethnic regional autonomy. Security stabilization. Foreign exchange shortages. Scenario A, stabilized central development model, moderate probability. Ethiopia continues large-scale infrastructure and manufacturing expansion with Chinese investment while engaging U.S. agricultural and digital partnerships. Outcome. Centralized governance persists. Industrial growth improves export capacity. Political pluralism remains limited but stable. Scenario B, internal fragmentation and external dependency, moderate probability. Ethnic tensions persist, increasing security expenditures. External financing fills fiscal gaps. Outcome. Executive authority strengthens further. Debt sustainability pressures mount. Limited democratic opening. Decisive factor. Security sector cohesion and fiscal reform capacity. 4 South Africa 2035, institutional resilience versus governance erosion. Baseline conditions, 2025. Strong constitutional framework. Independent judiciary. Chronic energy crisis. Party dominance by the ANC, though weakened. High unemployment and inequality. Structural pressure points. State-owned enterprise reform. Electricity infrastructure. Political factionalism. Scenario A, reform and institutional renewal, moderate probability. South Africa strengthens. Anti-corruption prosecution. Energy sector restructuring. Public procurement transparency. Rivalry impact. U.S. investment in renewable energy. Chinese infrastructure financing under competitive bidding. Outcome. Democratic institutions remain strong. Executive power constrained by courts and media. Slow but steady economic stabilization. Scenario B, institutional fatigue and executive drift, lower, moderate probability. Economic stagnation fuels populist pressures. Expanded executive decrees. Increased state intervention without reform. Coalition instability. However, strong judicial independence makes authoritarian consolidation unlikely. Comparative structural assessment. Variable Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Africa. Judicial strength moderate, strong, limited, strong. Patronage intensity high, moderate, high, moderate. Debt vulnerability moderate, high, high, moderate. Civil society power growing, strong, constrained, strong. Executive centralization risk high, moderate, high, low, moderate. Cross-cutting determinants to 2035. Debt transparency. Countries that publish loan terms and procurement details reduce patronage leakage. Security sector professionalism. Depoliticized military institutions reduce executive entrenchment. Digital revenue systems. Tax modernization reduces dependence on extractive rents. Youth employment. Economic inclusion lowers political volatility. Judicial budget independence. Courts require fiscal autonomy to constrain executive power. Strategic implication. Under continued U.S., China rivalry. Countries with stronger institutions, Kenya, South Africa, are likely to leverage competition without severe democratic erosion. Countries with concentrated executive control and security pressures, Nigeria, Ethiopia, face higher risk of patronage expansion if reforms stall. External rivalry is a multiplier, not a determinant. The trajectory toward 2035 depends primarily on fiscal transparency, constitutional enforcement, civil-military balance, procurement reform. Africa's future governance landscape will reflect institutional capacity more than foreign alignment. Mineral Geopolitics Strategy Brief, 2025 to 2035. Strategic context. The accelerating global demand for critical minerals lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, rare earth elements, platinum group metals, and copper has repositioned Africa as a central actor in the global energy transition and digital economy. Key drivers. Electrification of transport. Renewable energy storage. Defense technologies. Semiconductor manufacturing. AI infrastructure expansion. Africa holds 70% of global cobalt reserves, notably in Democratic Republic of the Congo. Major platinum group metal reserves in South Africa. Significant lithium in Zimbabwe and Namibia. Rare earth and graphite potential across Tanzania, Mozambique, and Madagascar. Simultaneously, China dominates mineral processing and refining. The United States and European Union are attempting to diversify supply chains. Gulf states, India, and Japan are expanding acquisition efforts. Africa is no longer peripheral, it is structurally central. The strategic question is not whether demand will grow. It is whether African states will capture value beyond extraction. Strategic risks. 1. Resource enclave risk. Extraction without beneficiation replicates the oil export model, capital-intensive, low employment, elite capture. 2. Debt for resource swaps. Opaque loan agreements tied to mineral concessions weaken fiscal sovereignty. 3. Executive capture. Mining contracts negotiated through executive discretion rather than parliamentary oversight. 4. Commodity volatility. Overdependence exposes budgets to global price cycles. 5. Security militarization. Mineral regions can become securitized zones dominated by patronage-linked security actors. Strategic pillars for mineral sovereignty. Pillar 1, Contract transparency and sovereign bargaining power. Mandatory publication of all mineral contracts. Parliamentary ratification of long-term concessions. Independent mineral contract audit units. Competitive bidding platforms digitized to reduce political discretion. Model frameworks include Botswana's Diamond Joint Venture Model, Norway's Sovereign Resource Governance Architecture. Policy Tool. Establish a Pan-African Mineral Negotiation Advisory Facility under the African Union to pool legal and economic expertise. Pillar 2, Local Value Addition Mandates. Extraction alone captures 10 to 20% of value chain profits. Strategies. Phased local processing requirements. Incentives for cathode and precursor manufacturing. Public-private mineral processing hubs. Regional beneficiation corridors, example DRC, Zambia Copper Belt integration. By 2035, success means at least 30 to 40% of battery mineral processing occurring on African soil. Pillar 3, Sovereign Wealth and Stabilization Funds. Resource revenues must be insulated from political cycles. Rules. Legally ring-fenced stabilization funds. Spending caps tied to long-term commodity price benchmarks. Independent fund boards. Mandatory public quarterly reporting. Without this, mineral windfalls amplify patronage. Pillar 4, Mineral-backed infrastructure discipline. Avoid infrastructure for mineral swaps negotiated in opaque executive channels. Instead, open tender infrastructure financing. Independent debt sustainability analysis. Debt ceilings legislated through Parliament. Strategic autonomy requires diversified capital sources, not exclusive alignment. Pillar 5, Regional Industrial Strategy. Fragmentation weakens leverage. Recommendations. African Continental Free Trade Area harmonized mineral tariffs. Joint processing zones. Shared environmental standards. Cross-border grid investments for industrial zones. Collective bargaining reduces race-to-the-bottom concession regimes. Strategic Forecast, 2025 to 2035. If reforms are adopted, Africa becomes a processing and manufacturing partner. If not, the continent risks high extraction, low value capture, rising executive patronage, external geopolitical leverage over fiscal policy. Mineral geopolitics is a governance question, not only a trade question. Part 2. Governance Reform Playbook for African Policymakers, 1,000+ words. Executive Summary. Sustainable development in Africa hinges less on ideology and more on institutional architecture. Patronage systems are rational responses to weak tax capacity, elite insecurity, and electoral financing pressures. Reform must address structural incentives, not just moral appeals. This playbook focuses on executive power discipline, fiscal modernization, anti-corruption enforcement, and institutional resilience. Reform objective: shift from patronage state to rule-based state. Patronage systems persist because revenue flows are concentrated: oil, minerals. Executive offices control appointments and procurement. Political survival depends on distributing rents. Therefore, reform must diversify revenue, limit executive fiscal discretion, increase institutional veto points, protect enforcement agencies from political interference. 2. Fiscal reform as foundation. 1. Broaden domestic tax base. Digital tax systems, mobile payment integration. Property tax modernization. VAT compliance tracking. Why it matters. Taxation creates accountability. Citizens who pay demand oversight. 2 Independent revenue authorities. Revenue authorities must be legally insulated from political appointment cycles. Best practice. Fixed-term leadership with parliamentary confirmation. 3 Procurement reform. Public procurement accounts for 15 to 30% of GDP in many African countries. Reforms. Mandatory e-procurement platforms. Public beneficial ownership disclosure. Real-time contract monitoring dashboards. Impact. Reduces discretionary allocation to political allies. 4 Executive power constraints. Strong executives are not inherently authoritarian. Unchecked executives are. Reforms. Parliamentary budget authority. Parliament must amend and review executive budgets with independent research capacity. Fixed-term security appointments. Police and military leadership appointments with staggered terms to reduce politicization. Judicial budget autonomy. Courts funded through constitutionally protected allocation. Emergency powers reform. Clear time limits and legislative renewal requirements. Anti-corruption architecture. Anti-corruption commissions fail when appointed by executive. Underfunded. Prosecutorial powers restricted. Design principles. Independent prosecutorial authority. Transparent appointment processes. Protection from dismissal except via judicial review. Public asset declaration enforcement. 6 Electoral finance reform. Patronage often funds elections. Recommendations. Spending caps. Public campaign financing. Transparent donation disclosure. Criminal penalties for illicit financing. Without electoral finance reform, patronage regenerates. 7 Civil service professionalization. Political patronage weakens bureaucratic capacity. Actions. Merit-based recruitment exams. Performance-based promotions. Civil service wage rationalization to reduce bribery incentives. 8 Security sector reform. Security institutions must not become instruments of regime preservation. Reforms. Parliamentary oversight committees. Independent inspector generals. Clear chain of command separation from ruling party structures. 9 Youth and social contract strategy. By 2035, Africa will have the world's largest youth workforce. Governance without employment leads to instability. Policy focus. SME financing. Digital economy expansion. Technical vocational training linked to mineral and energy sectors. Public works programs tied to infrastructure upgrades. Youth inclusion reduces volatility that executives exploit to centralize power. Digital governance infrastructure. Digital transformation is anti-patronage infrastructure. Examples. Digital land registries. Blockchain-based mineral tracking. Electronic court case management. Open budget portals. Transparency shifts incentives. 11 Implementation sequencing. Reform cannot be simultaneous across all sectors. Recommended sequence. Phase 1, 0 to 3 years. Digital tax reform. Procurement transparency. Debt transparency laws. Phase 2, 3 to 7 years. Judicial fiscal autonomy. Electoral finance reform. Sovereign wealth fund discipline. Phase 3, 7 to 10 years. Deep civil service reform. Industrial value-add expansion. Regional mineral integration. 12 Political economy reality check. Reform threatens entrenched elites. Therefore, build coalitions across business, civil society, youth, and reformist political factions. Use external competition strategically without dependency. Anchor reforms in constitutional amendment processes where possible. Incremental reform is more durable than abrupt transformation. Conclusion. Africa's mineral wealth intersects directly with governance architecture. If executive power remains unchecked, Mineral wealth will entrench patronage.